have you with us and joining us every week. And we're always blessed to know that people are either watching this on YouTube or listening in on audio. And G, great to have you with us right back from the Horde.
Back from the Horde, a little bit hoarse. My voice is from all that shouting that we've had over the weekend. But thankfully, no broken ribs.
Amen. Oh my gosh. Last year, I couldn't believe it as I'd heard the news that you had gone to the Horde and been taken to hospital. And I think it was the last game or the last 5 minutes, wasn't it, of all
Last
the
5
games
minutes
that
of
you were
all the
playing?
activities.
And what went through your head, G? You saw the prize, didn't you? There was some kind of something to grab.
It was like capture the sword, and we
Capture
had
the sword.
teams. And so there was probably, I don't know, 30 guys in a big ruck all fighting to get the sword. And I managed to get my hand on the handle, which, you know, all those arms, it was like, I can't let go. So I was pulling, I was in the middle of all this big ruck. And then as I was tugging away, someone charged. One of our guys, he's a big guy, bit of a rugby player, charged with his shoulder down, full pelt, and he hit me up underneath the ribs. And when I heard the crunch, that is sort of when I ducked out. And then when I started trying to breathe and it started clicking, my rib was clicking. I was thinking, that's probably not a great sign. So anyway, not long after, struggling to breathe on the floor, whatever, I end up in resus in the hospital with Jim Dyson, who also had a broken rib. And had a nice evening in the hospital. Never experienced morphine before. It's quite amazing. Helps you breathe. And then I think the thing that went through my mind as I went off in the car was, who's going to preach? Because I was due to preach the final message. And then our Dave T steps up and does my message and does an amazing job. God moves. So that was a year ago. And then my next thought was, I'm flying out, or I'm meant to be leaving at 5 a.m. in the morning to go to Rwanda to my son's wedding. Jordan and Liz were getting married. And I was flying out in a few hours. And so in the hospital, they said, you're not going anywhere for 2 weeks because your lung could deflate. And I thought, how am I going to tell H? She will not be happy. And I felt like, a boy that had been up to no good and I got caught. That's probably how I felt. And I was going to get told off.
Christian Men's Weekend.
So when she came in, I think it was, I don't know, midnight, she came in and she said, what were you thinking? And I said, I was thinking I could win the sword.
Yeah, saw the prize.
And I was more invincible. But anyway, miraculously, the guys prayed. I didn't get on the plane, but a few days later, just God moved and
was incredible.
Had healing. And okay, I was pretty sore, but I managed to get on that plane with my chaperone, Luke, who nursed me through the flight and turned up and made it to the wedding. So, yeah, that was last year.
Wow. So I'm imagining that you're a little bit more cautious this year to be diving into a pylon.
H promised me not to actually get involved. And I thought, who's going to step up? Our Dave's not there. So I actually used that time more wisely. I prayed for the other guys, and we only had one broken rib this year.
Oh my gosh.
From a first timer at the Horde.
Wow.
And do you know what I mean? That's something to walk away from, saying, wow, I've got a mark.
Well, at least you got free healthcare in the UK. Over here in the States, I've got to be thinking about my guys. It's like, this is really going to cost them if anyone gets an injury. So we've got to be careful with these things.
It's so true. We are a little bit more perhaps carefree in that way.
Yeah, when you've got to start thinking about health insurance, it is another level.
Tough, Josh.
Yeah, it is. So G, amazing stuff at the Horde. Are you just sharing a bit before we got going and recording today about the amazing impact of what God was doing? It's so encouraging to hear about, and I know that a lot of other locations are going to be doing the Horde where they are in the coming weeks and get to have the videos and get time together as men. But one of the things, G, that I wanted us to talk about today is we had someone message in the last week, and they were asking about, how do I return to church? So there was someone who's been listening to the podcast, and I just want to say, if you're listening to this and you are currently not attending our church, we're so grateful that you kind of connect in
Yeah.
here, and maybe this is just an easier first place to come for now. But the guy was asking, how do I make a return? How do I get involved in church again after being disconnected? And I thought that there's a great point there, really, for trying to speak to those people. And not only, obviously, there's lots of people who, who are attending our church at this point, but I think it's even for them knowing what's a breadcrumb way to get back into church. So, G, for someone who's listening to this and thinking like that, what's your first kind of response to that?
I think just the fact that someone is saying, "Hey, I want to reconnect somehow. How do I get back?" I mean, I want to encourage you first of all that there's something about I know where I am is not somewhere I want to stay. So just to encourage you, if that is you, I believe that God is encouraging you. The Holy Spirit's cheering you on within that, and I love to hear that. There's something I realized is that often we'll look and think, how did I end up here? How did I end up out of church? How did I end up in this place where I am not part of a family? I'm somehow disconnected. And one of the things I've realized, it's not always a great big sin. It's not like I went off and lived this wild, crazy life. Often it's just through carelessness that we get lost. Just making some decisions, whether
Right.
it's through distraction. We use the parable of the sheep, don't we? Jesus like talked about it, about, hey, sheep don't get lost on purpose. And I want to say that to people that are listening as well is, hey, maybe you didn't, many of you wouldn't have got lost on purpose.
Mm.
It might have been through the carelessness of others. Maybe it was through some hurt. Maybe it was through some poor misjudgment. And think about sheep. They'll find a little hole. They got the whole field, but they'll find the one hole where the fence is broken and they'll just think munch, munch, munch. And before you know it, it's like, and you see them in the road, where we live, we have, a lot of sheep, and you'll drive up a small lane sometimes and there's a sheep that has got out and he is busy trying to get back in,
Mm.
but can't find a way back in,
Wow.
and he's trying to get into the fence and it's like you won't get your head through that fence, and he's struggling. And so there is something about the gate that is open, and you'll find the farmer's going to get a call. He comes down, he gets hold of that sheep and he opens the gate, puts the gate in. And I want people to know that Jesus, he's known as the gate. And I think for anyone that is a
Brilliant.
believer, your place is to be in God's house. And he has actually got a greater agenda about getting you back in God's house than actually you thinking perhaps how awkward that feels. And can I trust again? Am I perhaps going to get hurt again? Or are people going to sort of somehow ask me many questions? But there's a gateway. And even for us as Freedom Church, Josh, I think one of our passions is to make sure we have a gateway where people are able to return. And I love it when I hear about, I've had a load of stories this weekend actually on reports of people who have been out from church for years, suddenly turning up into one of our locations and saying, do you know what? I thought this would be worse than what it is. Coming back, I thought it'd be tougher. But and this is what they said. They said, I feel I've come home.
Wow.
And this is from someone who hasn't been in our church, but has been out of church. And they make that bold step and they're in and they're just like, hey, I'm home. And so that excites me when I hear about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that is such a key thing, is your mentality towards your expectation, what it's going to be like. And I think sometimes we can build these pictures in our heads of coming
Yeah.
into an environment that we've been out of for a while and thinking kind of everyone's going to be looking over their shoulder and be like, oh, they're back. And it's like, that's not how the church is at all. And again, the story of the prodigal son is just a great demonstration of this, where the son thinks he's going to come back and be rebuked by his father and just go and live as a servant because it's like, I've messed up, and it's like, I've made mistakes. The
Yep.
father doesn't even entertain that thought. It's just, hey, my son's back. Get the robe on his shoulders, get the ring on his finger, get the sandals on his feet. Let's celebrate. And that is what people who I've seen come back to church over the years are always struck by, is they're welcomed back. They're not made to
Yep.
feel guilty or ashamed or treated awkwardly or kind of like people making sideways glances. It's not like that. But I think that that's what the enemy wants to distort and discourage people with, to say, oh no, you wouldn't want to go back there because that's how you're going to be treated, or that's how it's going to feel, where it couldn't be further from the truth. Actually,
Yeah.
the church, it's all centered on loving God and loving others. And when we see someone returning, there's an excitement and an encouragement about that for all of us.
Yeah, and I've been very aware that in the past, examples perhaps from history and the way religion works is that there are a lot of people who have perhaps wanted to return. Perhaps they've been through some failure in their life and they somehow feel ostracized, and, for them to walk in, people perhaps wouldn't talk to them. And that's why when we built Freedom Church, we were so determined to say, do you know what? This church isn't just ours. It's for those that have not yet turned up. It's for those that need to return. And for any of us to think that, people have maybe been through a terrible time or they failed and we're going to stand there in judgment, that's not God's house. That is not what Jesus intended. And so we really build this into the culture of our churches, is that we are ready every week to welcome someone home. And for us to step in the place of like, what are you doing here? Heck, well, what are you doing here? Is like, we cannot be in that place. We are here to welcome people home. In fact, that's part of our prayers every week.
Amen.
Me and H pray on the way to church, and we're always praying, Lord, will you bring people home? Will you bring people home? And if you're listening to this and maybe, you've got some history, perhaps there's been some hurt or some, I don't know, loneliness, or you feel let down. I think that was a big one. I just felt let down, and somehow I distanced myself bit by bit. And before I knew it, I was just alone and out of God's house. If you're listening to this, I want you to know that there is a place waiting for you. There are people waiting to love you. There's a part for you to play. We haven't got everything covered. There's something that you have that you can bring for this season, for this time. Is not over. In fact, I think there's some people even with perhaps, I don't know, prophetic words that you've had over your life, and even those have niggled you saying, I haven't seen that yet. But God is saying, come on, there's a new season, there's a new time. And I think right now there is a new season where God is bringing back, he's bringing back people into his house, is the best place you can be. And so we're set up praying every week that you would respond to that call, because we can't wait to welcome you home.
Absolutely right. And I think for people returning, one of the things that I would say is you've got to deal with the thing that actually made you leave in the first place. And I think
Yeah,
one
that's
of the
good.
reasons that people leave church, for example, is they don't want to live God's ways. So there is something about their life that's compromised. Maybe they started a relationship with someone that's not a Christian. They've pursued things in their life that weren't of God, whatever that might be. If you try to come back and you come into that environment and you are welcome back, you are loved. What I've seen over
Yep.
the years is people return, but they are still not willing to deal with that one thing in their life. And so it's a momentary return. They might return for a week or two and then they go again because it's like, I'm not actually willing to deal with this thing in my life, So I had I got a good friend of mine, his name's Elijah, and he was coming to our church here in Raleigh for a good number of months, and he was kind of like on the peripheral part of the community, but he would kind of come in and out, and then he just disappeared. He just stopped coming. And then it was Easter last year, he came, and after when he came back, I was really surprised to see him because I haven't seen him for a long time, and he just showed up from nowhere. And then he started coming to everything and anything. He was at prayer. He would come to our midweeks. He would be there Sunday serving, and it was like he went from almost being very on the edge and disengaged and like on the periphery to then disappearing to then being fully committed. And I was speaking to him about it this last week, and I was saying, what happened? Like, why did you come back and it was different? And he said, before I came back, he said, where I was living, he was like living in an RV at the time. And he said, I made the decision there and then. It's like, Jesus, you've got it all. If I'm going back, I'm going to give him everything this time.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's the only way to do it. And I think of, again, the picture of the rich young ruler. He's got all these things he's doing, but it's like, it's not everything. And if it's not everything, it's nothing. And I think that what you have to do to return is to say, God, you've got all of my life, not just some of it submitted. It's got to be all.
I think when we use the story of the prodigal, you know, we generalize a lot with it, and it's almost like, well, he returned and he came home and the father was open arms. Yeah, we all love that bit. The fact that it's unconditional, you're home, son. But the big part of it is his attitude turn. The big part is this, in essence, it's repentance. You know, the story literally talks about him. He's been living one direction. He gets a realization, because you need a revelation. You need to realize and get a revelation about the place I'm in. I'm here with the pigs. This is how low things have come. And it's like, do you know, I'd be better off back in my father's house, even as a servant. And so what he's saying is, I'm not entitled to it. So he's dealt with entitlement. He's realizing his position. He's got a revelation. And that revelation leads to a repentance, which is realigning and returning. So he turns from where he is, from the pigs, and he turns towards home. So when the father's there, you see, what he's saying is, that's the basis of this welcome back. It's not like he's got this son who is arrogant, going to come back for a little while, carry on with his own ambitions. No, the father knows that this is almost like a different son that's come home, because he's had a revelation about repentance. And as you said, Josh, whatever that thing might have been, you know, if it's a returning, you need to have the revelation. So if there's been compromise in your life around sin or around other things, if there's compromise and that caused you to leave the house of God, because if we don't change, we find a reason to leave the house of God. But if that compromise is still present in your life, and you think, oh, I feel I need to get back to church, but you haven't changed, it probably won't last long. You'll come and have a little fix for a few weeks, and then it'll be, actually, I don't really know if I need this, because your heart hasn't changed. It's not just a location changed. I'm out of church, now I'm in church. No, it's actually about the heart of wanting to be in God's house, because that's the place he's called you for. So there needs to be that revelation.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's for sure. You almost don't wait just to come back to church. Actually have the moment with God on your knees, in your RV or in your home, or go for a walk and actually come and give it to God and then return. I think that's where it begins. It's making a decision there. And I think that makes the return then so much easier and better.
I've also said, Josh, to a few people, I've had conversations before they've returned to church. So this one guy who'd made some real poor decisions, he ended up in a bad place for a number of years. And then he just wanted to meet up with me. So I met with him, and he said, things have never been the same since I've been out of God's house. And he said, I want to come home, but I struggle with the shame and all this stuff. I said, look, you don't need to carry that shame. If you come, you know, you put your heart right, you've come in. So I walk through forgiveness. I walk through putting himself right. But one of the things I said is, right, this Sunday you're coming back. He goes, yep. I said, I can meet you on the door. I can save a seat for you, because it's a priority that you know that you're welcome back. I said, but I want to warn you, please don't come in and sit at the back. I said, don't come in for the next few weeks feeling like you're almost not, you know, am I welcome? Or let's do this quietly. It's almost like sitting on the edge of the river, putting your feet in. I said, if you've been out of God's house, you've been away, don't come back and just tip your toes in. I say, if you're coming back, I want you jumping in. I said, I'm encouraging you to sit
Yeah,
on
that's
towards
really
the
good.
front. I said, if we're going to worship, I want to see you worshiping. I said, God doesn't deal with like a halfway house. He doesn't say, hey, you're a little bit in the quarantine area. You're in the bit of like till you feel better. If you have dealt with those issues and you're coming back into God's house, take your place.
It's
You don't
really
need
good.
to earn your
Love
place
that.
to come towards the front. Already there is a place for you. And so I'd encourage anyone that's listening, that's thinking, I need to come back. Don't come in. I'm cheering that on. I want to see you like come up and say, I'm back. I'm here. I'm going to take my rightful place. It would be like one of my sons coming back after living abroad for a time and saying, I'm going to sit, out in I don't know, on my drive for a while because I just feel like I haven't been around for a while. We're going to say, come on, sit on the sofa. Let's get the food out. It's a similar thing. Find your place. This is home. You're a son. You're a daughter of the house.
Absolutely right. And again, I just think of my buddy Elijah who came back, and I'm pretty sure he was helping set down on the first Sunday he returned, and that just exemplified, because I remember almost being marked by that, being like, oh, you're not just showing up here, you're actually helping us put all the stuff away.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
just got
Jumping
involved.
in.
Yeah, just exactly what you're saying there. Just saying, I'm going to do, like, I'm here to stay, and that exemplified through his attitude and his posture right from the beginning.
Yeah. The people that I have seen come, they almost have missed for whatever reason. They've been away. They come in and they're giving it a go. It's almost like, let's test the waters. Most most of those people don't tend to stay. The ones
Yeah,
that I've seen
yeah,
find a place, exactly what you just said, Josh. It's like this, right? 100%. I'll be there. I'm here. I'm going to own this. Right? Where can I help? Sign me up for volunteering. 2 weeks time, I'm involved, and it's those are the ones that I see. This is my place.
it's
I'm
really
not
good.
just testing it. I'm committing to it. There's a big difference.
And I think even taking the example of that person that reached out to Yuji, that they were intentional enough to actually have a conversation before they returned. And I think actually that is, again, something I would recommend. You're not just
Absolutely.
choosing a random Sunday.
Yeah.
You're not just hoping that you're going to get to Sunday morning and pluck up the courage to do it. When you can reach out at any point when you're feeling that conviction, because those convictions can come and go. You can feel them strongly, and there's like, oh, don't worry, I'll
Yeah.
sleep on it and I'll feel less convicted tomorrow. It's like, when you've got the conviction, reach out, write a message and say, hey, it would be great to meet to maybe a leader or a good friend or a pastor, and say, let's connect. I want to, this is what has been happening in me. And then you get to talk it through. I think that then helps build a bridge for you. I think it helps build accountability for you as well, to say, look, I am going to come, like you said, G, this Sunday, and these are my intentions. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and just connecting with someone when you're there, and perhaps just even having that honest conversation. I think if you're going to come in and go out without connecting, you might feel a little bit, ooh, it'll be hard to come back again. I think just being a little bit vulnerable to connect with someone is always going to help you journey that through. Also, the other sort of area I want to perhaps speak into is area of relationships. So when you look at why people disconnect from church, often it's because they felt let down. There was brokenness. Someone recently I heard of, this is a classic thing. Things got changed. Some of the areas of volunteering within our church got changed. The way we did it, teams, and this guy was on a certain team and he got asked to shift to another team. It didn't work out how he perhaps expected. And because of it, he felt a bit let down. And so do you know what he did? It's like, I'm going to take some time out. Because basically he felt a little bit hurt. That's what it is. He felt hurt. And it was in a very slight way, struggled with the change. And then because perhaps he thought, oh, someone didn't call me that week, which can happen. It then builds, and the enemy loves this stuff. He loves it. It's like, see, the enemy's mandate is to get believers out of the body of Christ. and actually even get the church to seem like the aggressor, the one that's, oh, the church has done this. When you boil it down, often it wasn't the church, was it? It was someone that perhaps either didn't communicate well or didn't handle that the best they could, or our expectation. And this guy had an expectation. And with it, he thought, I'm going to have a couple of weeks off. It went to a couple of months off, more distance.
Yeah.
See, when you have distance, it distorts reality. Distance distorts reality. And what we've all had this, when you don't see someone for a little while and you think, oh, we did have a couple of words maybe, and you start looking into it,
Yeah,
or you
for
start
sure.
thinking, maybe there's an issue, and then you see them and you don't really have the same connection, and you're thinking, yeah, there is a problem. And it's just amazing how that you imagine scenarios, and the enemy loves to play out scenarios, and he'll say, oh, you're not really valued in that place, and I'm sure more people would have knocked on your door, and you're just there serving, and all these things. And this guy got himself in such a lonely place where he, through hurt and then relational breakdown, ends up separated. That's what the enemy wants to do, is to separate you. And if someone is listening right now and you've been through some hurt, maybe there was a real justification, as in you were mistreated within a church. I want to say, still,
Yeah.
please don't allow that. It's like, we say this about marriage. If you've experienced parents that have had a broken marriage, it doesn't mean you're going to go out and say all marriage is broken and bad. There are some bad examples within church. No church is perfect, but you know what? God's perfect plan for you is the church. And
Absolutely right.
that's what he has for you. And your place, there is a place that's missing, and you're missing out on fulfilling your potential, because I think your greatest potential is fulfilled within the church. So overcome that relational brokenness, overcome that hurt. Again, the enemy is really capitalized, and you hear it often where people say, well, I've been hurt by church, and I've spent 9 years in the wilderness, disconnected, because we had, some relational breakdown or upset. Don't let the enemy rob any further. Get yourself in God's
That's right.
house, see healing, forgive. And I tell you what, the best is yet to come for you.
Absolutely right. And I think that can be a big reason why people end up leaving church. I think one of them is life, like making choices, bad choices, and in sin, and getting entangled in things, not fixing their eyes on Jesus. But I think that there is something also about picking up hurt, picking up offense. And you've preached many great messages about this, G, about how actually the phrasing is, it helps us understand this, but it says that we take offense. I take an offense at that, and that it's down to us actually, that where what we choose to take hold of and what we choose to let go of. And obviously
Yeah.
we could do a whole podcast about that subject.
Oh,
um
that'll be a good one, Josh.
but I think that there is something around, when we have taken that offense, it's like a bitterness in us. That's what it can do. And I think that we have to recognize when we're doing church, and we're organizing things, or we're planning things, we are also imperfect people. We're going to get things wrong, and we're going to make mistakes sometimes. And so we do have to have grace for one another. We have to believe the best. It's like, has this person done this in a malicious and hurtful way to spite me or anger me? Or was it a mistake? Or did I perhaps just read the wrong thing in the moment of what was happening? And I think what I would say to those people that left out of hurt is, God has been so gracious with us all. And it's like, we also then have to choose to be gracious and forgiving towards one another. And you cannot return until you deal with that unforgiveness. You cannot come back until you thought about, I've got to be gracious, I've got to be understanding, and I've got to believe the best of others. In Corinthians 13, it talks about that love keeps no record of wrongs. And it's like, we can't be listing these things. It embitters us. And we've seen people, haven't we, G, leave through the years where we might bump into them in town or something. and you can see their whole posture has changed, even like
Yeah.
sometimes the way they walk or the way they look with a face of thunder. It's almost like whatever that little seed of hurt, it's just grown in their lives and become bitterness, and it's poisoned them in some way. So you've got to deal with that to be able to return. You've got to say, God, I fully forgive. God, I'm
Yeah.
going to practice the grace that you show me. I'm going to give it to others and the church.
Yeah, I think we're under the illusion sometimes that, I went through that hurt with that person, people, and I then, separate, go my own way, but I'm carrying it. And we can easily think that, oh, well, that was like an experience that was isolated. But bitterness doesn't work like that. Bitterness feeds and it grows. So as you said, you could have an initial, hurt, but if it's not dealt with, what does happen when you have a splinter in there? It's painful and it's hurt. You got some hurt. You leave it, it gets infested, it gets sore, it can spread. And that's what you're talking about is you'll see someone who took on a hurt maybe 3 years ago, and at the time, they didn't look that bad when they took the hurt on, but because it hasn't been dealt with, it's festered, and it even comes over in their posture, in the way like of how they're living out life. That's why I'd encourage you. In a way, you're the one that ends up suffering, and that's why Jesus says, "Forgive, even as I've forgiven you. You must forgive," and that we're just told all of the time because we're human beings. And it will come into our life, but we choose to let it go. Because we've had some people come into the church and they'll say, maybe a couple will come in. It's like, great, meet you, what's your story? Well, we've been out of church for 7 years because we went through a difficult experience and we felt hurt, let down, but we're back. And what they do is they sit on the outside edge. They don't get involved because they're suspicious and they're almost testing. So they're looking, observing, watching. And often again, unless we deal with the hurt, we've only brought that hurt. It'd be like being in a broken marriage, going through divorce, and then bringing the same standards and treating our new partner with the same standards as the old. And so I want to encourage you, if you're going to step into a new church, it's got to be, we're going to forgive and let go, because church operates on trust. Church operates on saying, we're going to build healthy relationship. Let's step in. There is a sense of vulnerability, but let's choose to trust again. This is who God's made us, because otherwise you will hold people at a distance. You will be like passing through people. You will, as in, stay for a period of time, not really connect, move on, because there's a lack of trust, and suspicion will just alienate you. So I've almost turned up in the physical sense, but we're not actually turning up in our trust of that new church, that new relationship. So I'd encourage you, deal with your hearts and say, come on, we're both going to sit down as a couple and say, draw a line. That's happened. Let's come in and choose to trust again, because God has more for us.
Definitely. And I think just to say as well that we are sorry for where there's been places where there has
Yeah.
been hurt, or maybe there's been leaders that have not made the right decisions or even got things wrong. And we're all trying our best. And I think just to ask for your forgiveness and grace in that for anyone that has felt that hurt or felt that distance. That's our heart for people, is we want to always
Josh,
make space for people.
I want to add to that because, I've been pastoring for over 30 years, and I know I'm a different leader to what I was all those years ago. I am more aware. I am, all the time I'm trying to learn. Do I get it right all the time? No. And I join you in that, Josh, is, I am sorry for the times, if, any listeners out there, even on behalf of the church, perhaps it wasn't our church, I'm sorry if you have been through maybe some of that abuse, just abusive style of leadership, or whether you were just let down or not valued in the right way, whether that was coming from me or our leaders, because we have churches everywhere. We've got younger leaders that are growing. I would say we all need that grace where we're still human. We're doing our best. Our heart is not to do that. That's not I've had someone say to me where they were in one of our other churches in another country and just said, "Oh, the problem I've got is the way, my leader spoke to me." And I had to say, "Do you know what? That's not the way that we do that. And I'm sorry you had that experience, but will you trust us? We will have that
Yeah.
conversation with that leader. We will deal with that. But, the Bible says, let's deal with it. Let's talk about it. Let's forgive one another. Let's find that harmony." And so, yeah, I back that with you, Josh, is we do get it wrong, but our heart is to see this bride, cleaned up. We're doing our best. And I think don't think the worst, think the best of people, like think the best. And you might have experienced hurt, but one of the things I'm aware of is I can hurt people. And in the same way, we all at times, and we'll turn around and say, "I never meant to do that," or "I didn't mean to say that." Our intention wasn't that. And you want someone to trust you. So in the same way, I would say, hey, let's perhaps think the best of some of those people sometimes. When there's room for
Yeah.
taking it two ways, let's
Yeah.
choose to
That's
take
really
it
good.
the better way.
Absolutely. And I know there'll be lots of our church listening this, and their hearts breaking, because I think we
Yeah.
can't stand seeing people leave in a way that,
Yeah.
like seeing someone estranged from your family. It's heartbreaking when you've done
It's the
life
worst
with
thing.
people, you've loved
Yeah.
them, you've been with them through good times, bad times, and then they decide to leave. It is really sad and it's tough. And
Yeah.
and I think that, for those people listening to this that are part of our church, that their hearts break. Then maybe there's people coming to your mind right now that have walked out of church and left and gone away. I think that one of the things I would say is that you can't, like, people have to make their own decision. And I think that you can maintain a connection, but also when people have chosen to go, one of the things that always strikes me about the prodigal son story is the father clearly abundantly loves the son, but he never tries to go and find him in the foreign land. He doesn't try and convince him to stay when he says, "I'm leaving," but
Yeah.
he's ready to welcome him when he returns. And I
Yeah.
think that I know that father was praying for his son. And I think for me, that's probably the greatest advice I can give to you, is pray for those people. Pray for them, intercede for them, that they
Yes.
would get the conviction to return. If they just come because you've cajoled them along and say, "No, you should come back," they're often those that they come for one Sunday, maybe two, and they disappear again, because what had to the reason that they left in the first place has not been dealt with. So that was just something I just wanted to add. If you're
Yeah.
here as a part of our church, the best thing you can do, yes, keep a door open for people through relationship and to continue to encourage them, and but also is to be praying for them.
Yeah. And agree with that, Josh. I'm not. I hope this doesn't come over that I'm contradicting you
No, no,
here, but
not
just
at all.
add this element here is H. So Heather, she'll get a heart for someone that was in church
Mm,
and has, I don't know, been away from church for years. And she'll suddenly say, she'll just contact them. She'll be praying. So she's praying for different people. And she said, "You know what, Jane, who used to come years, I just can't get off my mind. I've been praying for her. I know that, I haven't seen her for a long while, but I'm just going to reach out." And I am thinking, really? I don't know if she even likes us. And you almost assume these things. But mum, she's got this she's got this audacious thing of, I've heard God speak to me. I'm going to reach out. And she'll just reach out and she'll just say, "We miss you. God's got more for you. And I'd love to invite you to church. You would be so
brilliant.
welcome. Let me know and I will meet you out front."
Mm,
She sends it. Now, she doesn't always get a response because, as you said, Josh, people have got to be in the right place to want to come. But we have got people in church now. I've got some families that are in the church because mum did that.
mm,
And the one family had been out for 7 years of church.
wow,
Mum contacts out of the blue. And then she replied and said, "Can I come round for a coffee?"
brilliant.
She comes around within 48 hours. And she spills out her heart and said, you know what? We were going through some stuff in our marriage. We were going through some things. And I just withdrew. And she said, and then I got lost. And she said, and your message came, and it was a sign of it's time to return.
Really
So I
good.
do want to say, guys, yeah, pray for these people,
But sometimes
but
it is
also
right
be
to reach
bold,
out.
because you might have people in your world right now. God is saying, reach out. What? And when I've said to H, like, oh, I don't know if they like it, she said, what have I got to lose? And I thought, oh, okay. And she has had the fruit that she has had from that. Again, it's not always a yes, but she's not worried about the no's. She said, I'm always going to keep a door open
Yeah, that's
for
great.
those that have gone, because it breaks my heart. But when I see them return, it fills my heart with joy.
Come on. Well, lots to think and chew on there. I really hope that that's been helpful for you as you listen in today. And G, thank you so much for making time for this. I know you've been so busy
I
with the Horde,
loved having time with you.
and also, I know that you're getting prepared as well for the Charge, which is our leadership event in October. So, church, if you could be praying for G and H as they go away this week and they spend some time preparing for the next thing.
Yeah, we're
Lift
getting
them up.
ready for the next thing, and it's going to be on fire, Josh. That Charge, get ready. If you're coming to the Charge, get ready. We've got some incredible plans. It's going to be the best one yet.
Come on. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.